a time. Yeah, this is tea time. Yeah, making a difference. One cup at a time. Tea time. So be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz. Tea time. Making a difference. One cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time.
Well, welcome back, guys. You know what time it is. It's tea time with Miss Liz, and it's storytelling time in words because we don't serve a beverage in the house. But both of us tonight are drinking tea, so we're going to be drinking a little bit of tea tonight. I have the incredible Don Sawyer in the house. He is a replacement for CC Robinson. Please check out CC Robinson's platforms. She lost her voice, so we have a replacement. And Mickey Mickelson, thank you from Creative Edge for thumping in and getting it done. We roll the ball and we get it always in line with getting you guys an incredible tea time. So tonight we have an incredible guest in the house. We have a disclaimer, we have bio, we have all that good stuff. But before we get to all of that stuff, we're going to get you over to Miss Liz's YouTube channel. We're going to get you to ring that little doorbell because that little doorbell gives you a notification that Miss Liz is live and you can join the tea times while we're live streaming. And if you'd like to watch the replays, please push hashtag replay and let me know where you're tuning in from because I always like to know where you're tuning in from. Now, what does Miss Liz offer you on her YouTube channel? Well, over 400 interviews of different guests from around the world, all walks of life. So if one tea doesn't resonate with you, I guarantee the other one will. So let's get started with disclaimer, bio, and let's get Dawn in here and let's spill a good old cup of tea. Tonight's tea is Teach, Explore, and Activist. That's the type of tea that we serve in this house. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz myself is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to see your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any Tea Time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith. However, may bring forth dialogues and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the giving time of airing. All Tea Time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment and taking any action that relates to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussions for some where they may be emotionally at risk. It is significant to know that this show is engaging in discussion forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about the disclaimer or the panelist discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in today's show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. And should you decide that this show is not made for you at this time, I respect those wishes and will see you at a later show at a later date and time. And we are cutting down the countdown. This is the 6th last tea time. We are down to 6 after tonight's tea time. And then Miss Liz is wrapping it up. But you can check out the reunion show on December 19th at 7 p.m. More information will be on that later on tonight before we wrap up. So now a little bit about my guest. Well, my guest, Don Sawyer, is an educator and writer who grew up in Michigan and moved to Canada in 1960. His diverse experience from teaching in a Newfoundland outport to training community workers in West Africa and designing a climate change action course for Jamaican youths have significantly influenced his writing. He has authored over 12 books across various genres, including 2 Canadian bestsellers, the young adult novel, Where the River Meets, and the adult nonfiction, Tomorrow is School, and I Am Sick of the Heart, Thinking About It. His children's books, The Meanest Teacher in the World, was translated into German, further showcasing his reach. Before settling in St. Catharines, Ontario, Don spent over 30 years in Salem Arm, BC, where he taught adult education and served as chair of the Orkagana University College Adult Basic Education Department. He has also contributed articles and co-ed to numerous Canadian journals and dailies. Don lives with his wife of 54 years and continues to pursue his interests in boxing and nature. Tonight we will be talking about his book, The Burning Gem, his tea, Teach, Explore, and Activist, and so much more. So let me get Don in here and let's spill some tea.
Hi there. How are you doing, Miss Liz?
Welcome, Don. It is a pleasure to have you here.
It's really nice of you to have me on. I'm glad that, gosh, I know there's a lot of people who are genuinely sad that your program is winding down, but I'm glad I was able to make it before you shut down completely.
Well, I always say the best for last, right?
Oh, good. I like that.
So, Don, let me take you down a road. Who were you as a little guy, and who are you now?
Golly, I was a suburban kid who, I mean, you know, you've probably seen that cartoon where there's about 4 or 5 people in this giant arena, and there's a banner across children of functional families. You know, like the whole place is deserted. So when I say that I grew up in a dysfunctional community, I mean, people are going to say, yeah, right. But, you know, it was pretty severely dysfunctional, a violent alcoholic father and a sort of detached mother. So, you know, it left some scars for sure. And but I think at the same time, you know, I came out of it with a determination to not only to, I think I maybe with empathy for people who are struggling, and also for a general sense of I grew up in a, you know, a pretty affluent and privileged community outside of Detroit, and I was pretty aware that that affluence was not the norm in terms of the global situation. And so I think I came out of that knowing that this was not my place, and I was going to have to do a lot of looking to find where my place was. And I think I'm quite happy to report that in the, well, let's say this over 70-year interim, I've done a great deal of that, and it's been a real joy to me. You know, from first experiences in rural Newfoundland to spending years in West Africa, working in communities all over Ghana, Gambia, Zimbabwe, as I say, until working also in Jamaica and other places. And all of that, I think, has really not just contributed to my writing, but certainly contributed to me as a person.
So Don, you traveled a lot.
Hmm.
So, out of all the traveling you've done, what place stuck out to you the most?
Well, you know, gosh, it depends on, you know, how you define that. I mean, just for example, my wife and I just got back from Spain, and we were up in the northern part of Spain, in Bilbao, and this has got to be, you know, the case study for urban renewal, urban design, and of course that's the Basque country up there, and to see, of course, doesn't hurt to have a $1 billion Guggenheim Museum there, but what they've done around it in terms of building in public transport, green space, walking areas, multiple public transit systems was just amazing. So, you know, that was very recent and very specific. But on the other hand, my experiences in Africa, where I wasn't just visiting, I was working and living with colleagues, and there, of course, I was able to get a much deeper insight into the culture and the way of life, and that has had a huge impact on me. So I would say the years that I spent in both the Gambia and Ghana. I mean, and I still stay in touch with friends of mine in the Gambia. In fact, one of them is now running for the leadership of a major party there. So you know, that's kind of fun too. And you know, you make friends all over the world, and you stay in touch with them. And I think you know, each person you meet, each culture you interact with, deepens you a little bit. Just makes you more aware that this is quite a world we live in. And while there's this enormous diversity, there's also this kind of commonality of,
Right?
you know, we're all sort of humans wanting much the same thing. And it's one of the things that drives me nuts, that, you know, we seem to fall into this, I suppose, instinctual pattern of breaking into tribes and, you know, fearful of the other. And that may have had some function 1,000,000 years ago or 500 years ago, but now it's completely dysfunctional. You know, we need to come together and start working on these existential threats.
Well, it's like you said, right? We get divided into these tribes, but we're all human beings, right? We all want the same common denominator. We all want peace. We all want love. appreciation, acknowledgement. We all want the same things.
Exactly.
And that's why I love having so many different diversities and inclusions on Tea Time, is because we can open those avenues of seeing that it's not just in Canada, not just in the United States, but it's worldwide, right? That we all want the same thing.
And I think that, that one of the things, Fujikawa and others have talked about the importance of identity. It's one of the major things that drives us, that we want to be recognized, and we want to be accepted. We want to be acknowledged. And I think, traditionally that's occurred within a very small group. But as we've become more urbanized and industrialized, those traditional bonds have started to break down. And so now we're trying to create, little tribes, places where we identify and belong.
I think we're making too many tribes.
There are, whether they're religious tribes or political tribes, and I mean, not to say, and I mean, there's, I think, appreciating your heritage and your identity is really important, and it can give you anyway. It doesn't always, but can give you a base, a strength that, the whole idea of roots and wings, right? But I think from there, then you need to understand that there's thousands of ways of being human in the world, and each one of them has something unique to offer. And I really believe that every one of those situations that I've encountered have broadened me as a person and broadened the understanding of the true global community that we all inhabit. And I must say, some of the stuff that I understand the need for identification, but if it's at the expense of a unity, then I think we've got to be awfully careful of it.
Yeah.
So there you are.
I love that you went to that word unity, because that's one of my biggest missions in the world, is to bring people together, right?
You've got it too.
When we start dividing everybody and start putting the identity before the individual, like the human race, well, then we have an issue, right?
Do we ever? And we do have an issue. We've got a darn serious issue, and and like you say, it happens everywhere. I mean, working in a place like Ghana, where there's like 48 different linguistic groups, tribal groups, there's all kinds of traditional rivalries, and you I mean, I know I do this without sounding like an idiot, but for the most part, when you're at a place like Ghana or the Gambia, it's like people look pretty much the same. I mean, but boy, if you're with like if I'm in the Gambia and I'm with my friend Alpha Jallo, who's a Fula, and he'll say, gee, look at that guy over there, he's Serahuli. I said, no, Alpha, how the hell can you tell that? He said, well, it's about the way he dresses. So I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that this isn't just us, but there's this instinct, it seems, for us to be able to, so I really think it's time that we work at overcoming those. I mean, it's fine to understand that we're different, but let's celebrate those differences.
Yeah.
Let's draw from them. I mean, that's the other thing, I guess, that drives me nuts, is it's like, it's not just that. Well, I think I sent you a quote from Wade Davis, who's one of my favorite.
I think, yes, you did.
Did I send that? I'm going to have to quote it.
Yes, it's in the bottom of the email. I remember the quote.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I have that here, but anyway, I think I actually have it up here. Can I read it to you? Is that
sure? Go ahead.
The world in which you were born is just one model of reality. Other cultures are not failed attempts at being you. They are unique manifestations of the human spirit. So here we have all this marvelous diversity of ways of being in the world. And rather than just saying, wow, that person's not like me, they must be wrong. No, geez, let's open up. What are they doing? I mean, they've been at this for, a few 100,000 years too. What can we learn from them? And what do they have to offer us? Boy, believe me, if you're open like that, they always do. Every place has something special to teach you. Yeah. Anyway,
Don, and I think that goes into the writing degrees, right? But the different genres, right? It's almost like another different tribe, right? You're a writer, so you're in science fiction, you're in fantasy, you're in romance, you're in horror. We're dividing everybody. Mm-hmm. We're putting them in these different patches, and we're just like, well, if you like me, come here. If you like me, come here. but nobody's coming together. And
Yeah.
and that's where my frustration is, right? Is when do we start coming together as individuals?
Well, I think it's not, I mean, again, you know Carl Sagan, the biologist, he's an astronomer, really, but he was he since died, but he said, I just happen to have it here, human history can be viewed as a slowly dawning awareness that we're members of a larger group. We have broadened the circle of those we love. If we are to survive, our loyalties must be broadened further to include the whole human community, the entire planet Earth. The choice is clearly the universe or nothing. And I mean, the wisdom of that is so clear. And I think it's undeniable, but it's also very hard to accept. I mean, I don't think we're well equipped to deal with the kind of diversity that we're tossed into right now. I mean, from an evolutionary psychology point of view. But we better figure it out, because you know. And so I mean, I have a certain understanding of people who are hesitant about the people who are different, of course. But and it's not to say that everybody who's different is charming and wonderful and delightful. They're not, because I've worked with some people in Africa that are clobber. But you know, it's like people are different people, and people are people, but each place has something to offer. And I'm really concerned, really, that you know, if we don't figure this out pretty soon, the kinds of issues that we're facing globally, you know, like climate change, obviously, but also global poverty, the things that are driving people to immigrate, you know, this whole refugee issue and immigration issue is causing such tremendous angst and division. And it's like, okay, I know we're not really prepared to deal with this multiplicity of cultures and peoples, you know, okay, but we've got to start working at it, you know, like, and I think that it's so important that we start working in the schools, for example, you know, where, you know, kids, you know, when they're born, they're completely selfish, right? I mean, they literally are selfish. That's all they think about, is gratifying their immediate needs, which is fine. That's the way they survive. But as they get older, we start to teach them that, no, you're part of a larger group, and you have to make certain adaptations to be part of that group and benefit from that group and enjoy that group. You've got to share. You know, you can't knock this kid's, you know, castle down just because you feel like it. So we teach these kids that, no, you can't just be selfish. You have to be caring. You have to be thoughtful. You have to be empathetic. And so that's how kids grow up to be decent, you know, adults. But we don't do that very much at a cultural level, where we say, now, look, sure, your instincts may be that someone who looks different from you, speaks a little differently from you, is untrustworthy. But that's not the case. Let's talk about this. You know, we know that so many people have, well, the anthropologists tell us that we've grown up in groups of about 160. And so, you know, that was sort of the size of a band for, you know, that like maybe for 500,000 years. We just sort of hung around, and anything beyond. And apparently, I mean, I just find this interesting as a concept, that we're capable of seeing about 160 people as individuals. Once we get beyond that, we start to generalize, because the brain can't classify much more than that. So generalization, if you're within a larger tribal group, doesn't mean a lot. But if you're looking at a larger tribal group, it's stereotyping. You know, it's like, oh, I don't have enough time to figure out who that guy is, but he's got red hair, so I know he's like this and this and that.
Yeah, he's got those characters already, right, whether he has red hair or not. Right?
Get them all figured out. And again, these are, you know, I think I'd like to see a lot more evolutionary psychology taught in schools, so kids learn that, oh, okay, so I'm feeling this way because, you know, it made sense 500,000 years ago, but I also understand it doesn't make sense now. So we're going to work on this together and come out together. And, you know, we've seen all the stats on how people can dislike a group, but once they've met an individual, they can really love and care about the individual from that group. Still hate the group, but the individual, because they get to know them as a person, and it transcends that that tribalism, really. And it
Well,
seems to me that that's a real challenge we're facing.
and that's what the conversation is, right? Like, have an open conversation with people, get to
Have
know
an open
people
conversation.
without
Exactly.
without deciding, okay, well, that person's got red hair, so I'm just not going to associate with that person.
We
You
know,
know,
baby. I'm not even going there.
well, I'm a natural strawberry blonde, so I got a little bit of red in me.
No, I mean, some of the stuff I read suggests that. Well, there was a Canadian anthropologist, and it always stayed with me what he said. And he said, well, he said, 300,000 or 400,000 years ago, he said those tribes who saw strangers and said, "Oh, look, new friends, let's have them over for dinner." Well, they're probably no longer in the gene pool. So that distrust of the other, that fear of the other, that apprehension of competing with the other for limited resources, all of that might have made sense in the evolutionary history of humans. It doesn't make sense now, and somehow that's where we've got to get to.
I think we need to bring back, I don't know if you remember this in school. We had the big parachute where we would all like work together to make it go up and down. And then we would run in, right? And it was that safety blanket. I loved doing that in school because then you had this, you were looking at somebody that was beside you, right? And then we would have to run across, like lift it up and then go across. And you got to know people.
Wow.
Where I don't think we're doing that anymore
I don't
in
think
schools.
so either.
We're putting ourselves in all the kids in this classroom, all the kids in that classroom in different categories, right? And we're breaking and we're dividing human race. We're breaking the evolution of mankind by what we're doing.
Toward commonality. And let's face it, schools do reinforce those differences. I mean, the correlation between school success and socioeconomic background, which in turn is associated with cultural and ethnic backgrounds, is enormous. So we sort kids along socioeconomic lines, and they say, well, you're a success, and you're smarter than this kid. Therefore, you deserve special praise. You deserve, special privileges, special status, special wealth. And I think that's one of the things we're really running into now is that whole idea of kind of, we for 1,000 years, we fought the idea of the divine right of kings. Well, I think now we're fighting the divine right of wealth. No, those guys haven't. They don't, that's not they weren't just, given that. There's a whole bunch of factors, social and economic factors that allow them to get that. And so we need to be sensitive to that and understand that we all have a role to play. We all have something to do, and we're all needed. And all those cultures out there that have figured out different things, it's just awful that we're not, accessing them.
Absolutely.
I've just gone over and over again. I would, wow, what an interesting way of being. What an interesting way of doing things. When I was working in West Africa, it was a predominantly Muslim country, and I went to mosque with my students sometimes, and wow, it was really interesting. I mean, there were things, obviously, that from our point of view were at best different, but to see them as different isn't the same as seeing them as wrong, and beginning to say, well, this has worked, and rather than say it's not like ours, therefore it's wrong. Let's see what's going on here and what's working and what's not working.
Well, I think every tribe has their pros and cons, right? It's like life, right? Exactly. We all have our goods and bads.
Absolutely.
It's when we find a balance and work together to see, okay, well, this is working. Exactly. And this is going to work for everybody. So let's do it this way. This is not working. So let's stop doing this. Let's stop burning ourselves.
This will probably not go down well with some of your more religious listeners, but I wrote an essay one time about this idea that if we could just discard the idea that there is one God, that there's a God, a right God, a good God, and everybody else's God is by definition wrong. If we could just put that aside and come together and talk about what our beliefs and our cultures, not because they're God-given and not because they're therefore divinely right, but just this is the way we do things. Just think what we could then find in each other's religions if nothing else, religious traditions. I mean, we see some of that in, yoga, some years ago it was kind of unheard of, or, meditation. What? You can't do that. So there is some of it. But I mean, just think about all the things we have to learn if we could just get beyond that prejudice that we're right and they're wrong.
Absolutely.
And as you said before, it's not like this is just a North American thing. It's all, I mean, if you look at traditional names for Aboriginal people, like Innu, means the people. I mean, we're the people and they aren't. So it's like a lot of the names for people were the people. I mean, they were the people and everybody else was different and they weren't. And so we're running up against that everywhere, and so all of us are facing, I think, a real challenge to find ways to get beyond those prejudices and really try to find the good in each other.
Absolutely. So Don, I'm going to take you on your tea, because your tea, you had some excitement with your tea. You shared with me, you and your wife had a discussion, and that's what tea time is all about. And this is what Miss Liz is working on, is getting the tea into schools and families and communities and all of that. Is just start talking and getting to know yourselves. And when I asked Don what his tea was, he was like, "Oh, I don't know. This is pretty." So he gave me definitions of the teaching education awareness. Well, that's Miss Liz's. But if anybody wants to do teaching education awareness, you're more than welcome to use those words, because you might be teaching in a different way. So Don gave me teach, explore, and activist, but his wife also gave him the word adorable. So
among others, also argumentative.
See, and that's what I mean. But it got you to bond and connect and have that conversation. And that's what we need to start doing, is bringing that even into our own homes. When you're having dinner, where did the dinner conversation stop? This is something that I bring up with my kids, and they're all adults now, and my grandkids. Tell me about your day. Tell me what words mean to you, right? I did this with my step granddaughter, and I said, "What's your tea today?" And she said, "Tigers eats apples." And my daughter said, "Mom, that's not a tea." And I said, "Yes, that is. And you better pay attention." So Don, let's get into your tea, the tea,
right.
and explore and activist. I'd like to know why you gave me those words.
Well, the teaching, I mean, I couldn't avoid it. I mean, my first, I came to Canada in 1969, and to go to the University of British Columbia to do my PhD in modern Chinese history. Now, there was also, as you'll recall, a terrible war going on, and I refused to be part of that. That was a principled stand on my part. But I also, as part of that, I went to the University of British Columbia for my grad work. And I promptly flunked out of that. I mean, the Chinese is, well, for me anyway, different people, of course, have different proclivities, was almost impossible. So I left. I did okay in the history part, but the language pretty much did me in. So I had this very definite sort of career arc. I'd get my PhD in modern Chinese history. I'd go to a liberal arts college and teach Chinese, blah, blah, blah. Well, that was truncated really quickly. So here I was with my wife. We just got married. We were out in Vancouver. Didn't have any money. And so that whole plan was sort of was shelved. So I said, well, what else can you do? Basically, as an academic, you can't do anything very practical. You can't lay bricks. You can't. Although, in fact, I did work construction. But anyway, I said, well, maybe I can teach. So I started writing letters right across the country. And most of them said, are you crazy? You don't even have a teaching degree. Well, anyway, but finally I got to Newfoundland, which, as you know, is on the far east coast and there education had formal education had never been a priority, because the traditional society was provided all of that you needed to know. You learned how to fish, you learned how to build boats, you learned how to preserve food. You learned what you needed to survive. But that was all changing now. So anyway, make a long story short, I was offered a job in a high school in kind of a remote outport community. And then my wife, who actually had some education courses, was also offered a position. So we said, okay, we don't know where Newfoundland is exactly. We know it's way over there. So anyway, we went to this little outport community, beautiful little community, and we're welcomed there. And of course, I didn't know how to teach. And thank God I had enough sense to listen to the kids. And I had enough general knowledge to where, I could at least make things interesting. And so I listened to the kids and I learned how to teach. And that experience became the basis for my first book, which was Tomorrow is School. And I'm sick to the heart thinking about it. And that was actually from a note that a kid, because we were pretty different, as you can imagine, coming. I mean, this is a community that only had roads for 9 years. It only had electricity for 9 years. And up until that point, everything, all communication, all transportation was by water. But of course, the fisheries were dying, as we know now. So everything was changing. Everything was in flux. And we were so fortunate to be there when we were, because the traditional culture was still strong. But the modernity was also there. And so we had a place to maybe help kids make that transition. And it was a marvelous experience. And that book, I mean, actually, when I got home, one of my friends, Tom Wayman, who's a poet, really great poet, he said, listen, you wrote me all these great letters. I think you should write a book. I said, oh, Tom, I don't know how to write a book. He said, sure. He said, just put your experiences down. So I did. And unfortunately, it was my father was dying of cancer at the time, but I had a lot of time on my hands because I wanted to be with him. And so I finished the book. My wife typed it out, because in those days I was writing it out on a yellow pad, right? Everything was just handwritten. And you can imagine what editing was like. So we typed it. Anyway, I submitted it, and I think 2 publishers turned it down. And I was kind of ready to give up. And I sent it to Douglas and McIntyre, and they took it. And I said, wow, that's really great. And so, and then the next thing I know, it has become a bestseller. It's become and I said, what? How did that happen? And then it was being used in teacher training courses right across the country. And that was just so surprising, so amazing to me. And it kind of said, well, maybe there's something here, for me as a writer. And my friend Wayman said that he wants on his tombstone, well, at least he got a book out of it. And I kind of relate to that, because most of my writing has come from my experiences, one way or the other. Something I feel passionate about, something that's maybe I'm angry or I think that book came out of a place of love, Where the Rivers Meet, Tomorrow is School. But Where the Rivers Meet, my young adult novel, which is based on my very different experiences teaching in Lytton and a predominantly Native Indian school. And I could see the impact of colonialism and the destructive force that it was on the kids in the community. That book came out of something quite different, came out of anger. And so yeah, that teaching, when I was teaching, and then of course that went on, and I started to, I've taught at so many different levels. I ended up teaching adults, which I loved, and then became the director of art. And then I got into adult education and teacher education. And so I was working for Simon Fraser, training Aboriginal teachers. And that was really interesting. And then we started developing curriculum for Native communities, for Native adults, which have been largely neglected, making material that was relevant and affirming and interesting. And then I started working in Africa, and there we were developing training programs for community development workers. And of course, I didn't have I wasn't arrogant enough to think I could go over there and do this but I had I had a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge about what works with adults. And I was working with colleagues who knew the culture and the realities of where we were working. And together we created some really tremendous curriculum and some wonderful experiences. And to this day, I still have many friends over there. So that whole teaching, it just became a global experience from beginning to end. It was wonderful.
Well, I think, adult education, we don't speak about it enough, right?
No, we don't.
We at any age we can still learn. Keep the mind open. Get, take a new course, try a new workshop. We really got to encourage adults to not just stop thinking, like, stop learning. Oh, I know everything. Like, if you're closed minded, you're not going to learn anything because nobody can open the mind for you, right? But
Absolutely.
I think adult education is really deeply important, and I think that we need more of it, actually. Um,
Unfortunately, I think it's slipped off of the table. And not only is it, not for sort of evening schools, but people who, for whatever reason, have slipped through the cracks. And we had a lot, working with men who had gone into, let's say, logging at an early age, and then at 45, they, broken their back and they couldn't continue to work, and they needed to be, get that education. Women who maybe had been sort of abandoned by their husbands and were coming back to try to get the credentials that they needed to move on with their lives, and for them and their children. And we talked about how the people came in with two characteristics: weariness and courage. This was the last try for a lot of them, and it was so gratifying. And the thing about it is, you come to realize who you're dealing, people with wonderful life stories. Like two of the books I wrote, well, two were based on student stories, and they were written for adults. They were written for adult learners, or relatively easy to read, but a real honest to God experiences. And two of them were based. One of which was about a woman who had been horribly abused as a child, and but came through it all. And anyway, wonderful stories that they shared with me. And I wrote them into these novels, which have become very successful and were used in adult classes right across the country. So you say these are, yeah, okay. They don't have really refined academic skills, but they've got wonderful lives. They've got tremendous skills. They've got knowledge to impart and to share. But everybody's got a story.
well, and I think that's a new way of learning, right? Is storytelling.
Yeah,
Because when we start sharing our stories and we start learning from each other,
and
we
the
start
old way.
saying, "Oh, well, you did that. Well, I can do that too," right? Like,
Yeah, I've got a story. Hey, listen to my story. So everybody's
you
got
know,
a story. We
and
just don't.
I think that's a new way of learning with in today's world, right? Because everybody's being put into all these different tribes and categories and being divided, right?
Yeah,
Come together and start sharing your stories. It brings unity. It brings people understanding and brings the empathy back
absolutely.
into the communities and that as well. And that's why I love having these open conversations with guests like you, Don, is because when we start having conversations and we start having open, clean discussions, and no hate and no shame and no, oh, well, you can't do that. Yeah. Just have a conversation. Just sit and say, well,
Talk
why
to
do you
people.
why do you feel this way? Oh, well, why do you not like redheads? Maybe you dated a redhead and you have a bad outcome. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, I
start to get
absolutely
to
know
know
what you mean.
people.
The only thing I would add to that is that this, of course, is the way people have been learning for hundreds of thousands of years, is storytelling.
Yeah.
And so this, in some ways, is going back to the future. And it really concerns me when I see kids locked into this social media rather than listening to each other and to their parents. And there's a library system in Denmark where you can not check out a book, you can check out a person. So if you want to
I did
speak,
see that. Yes, I
isn't that
seen that.
wonderful? Yeah.
Yes, I seen that. I
So
thought that was really interesting
I thought
because
that was fascinating. You don't
that's what
know
we need to
anything
do is
about
check out people.
Islam. Well, here's a guy who's willing to talk to you about it. Oh, well, let's sit down and talk. If you've never really met a homeless person, this guy's willing to talk to you about what happened, how he landed there. I mean, that's the kind of interaction I think that we need to really break through all of this. And I must say, most of the stories I've told have been on the basis of that, of people telling their stories. And in the case of the adult students, incredible people, incredible stories, but they didn't have the writing skills to tell them. They had the oral skills to tell them. But so it was a real privilege, to be able to work with them, to put their stories into a novel that people found really compelling because they were real. They were real.
Well, and that's something that you brought up, Don, is reading and writing. Back in the day, you went and took care of your family. You got pregnant, you got married, you took care of your siblings because either your mom passed away from childbirth or stuff like that. You didn't have the time to read and write. And you didn't have those skills, and we didn't have those opportunities like we have today. Like, I get frustrated when children today, they have the internet and they don't use it to research and educate themselves. They'd rather waste their time on nonsense and trends, the latest trends, like
Oh my
to
God.
be seen.
Pokemon no, I
You
remember
know,
one time I was in a waiting room, a doctor's waiting room, and I guess I was feeling kind of feisty. But there were like 7 or 8 people there, and every single one of them was looking at their cell phone, and nobody was looking at each other, all looking at the phone. So I looked at this guy next to me. I said, "So what are you doing? Looking into the history of Peru?" I mean,
right? Are you like checking something else that is going to help you, like educate the mind, open the mind?
Yeah, exactly. What could you be looking at? Everything in the world is there, But instead, we're playing solitaire, or I don't know, looking at what's going on with the royal family.
Well, back in the day, we used to play solitary together as a family.
That's right. No, there was an idea.
And canasta, like a card game. I don't know if anybody knows how to play that game, but my dad played that, and my dad was a real good card player, and he would get really serious in it. Like, it was time to learn. It was time to understand the point system and understand how to build the sequences and stuff like that. But we don't do that anymore. We don't sit down and even have that time together.
But it brought people together too. It was checkers, or who cares, chess. I mean, it brought people together playing, bocce, and you look at in Europe where these guys are throwing the ball. It's not just about throwing the ball; it's about talking and interacting, and it's true in so many different ways. Anyway, but I will say I want to just make one point about the book I did on and working in Lytton, the Native community there. That was such a powerful experience for me, but I also understood the importance of ensuring, as a non-Native person, that the cultural aspects were as accurate as I could make them. And so I obviously did some secondary research, but most importantly, as I went to elders, in particular, a wonderful woman named Mary Thomas, who's unfortunately since died. And she granted me 4 hours of interviews specifically. And I was part of the book hinges on this young woman who's caught in this mess at school, trying to find herself, going on a spirit quest, which was traditionally done in the Shuswapmic community, as both women and men. But I wanted to make sure I had it right. Well, Mary didn't go on, but her sister did, older sister. She was one of the last women to actually go on one of these spirit quests. And so she was able to really tell me what it was, what it felt like, and what it looked like. And she also had this wonderful voice, this cadence to her voice that I transcribed and was able to actually use in the book. So again, I learned so much from that. It just all of everything. It's all about learning. So here we are, learning and teaching and exploring.
And we're exploring as well, right? We're going into the next word of explore, because we're exploring on different unities and stories and individuals. When you gave me the word explore, I was like, oh, this is going to be nice. I like this. I like that word explore, because we don't do enough of it, right? Get out there and do scavenger hunts. Like,
it's too scary. We can't go out there. Well, you might, No, I mean, I think I give you a quote again, that there's a difference between danger and discomfort. And we've lost that somehow. People, I don't want to go to, I don't want to go to Jamaica. It might be dangerous there. Oh, for Christ's sake,
it could be dangerous crossing the street where you are. Like,
so, let's go to New York instead, where the murder rate's like
yeah, like it's everywhere. And then that's one thing that I really like, Don, is that it's globally issues, right? If you get hit by a car, you get hit by a car in any country. It doesn't just happen in Canada, right?
I mean, boy, when I was in Ghana, I don't know anybody gets out alive there. The traffic is so wretched. So no, I mean, you're absolutely right. And it's just and yet, if you're smart and you have some faith in people, and again, there is danger, and you don't want to go someplace that's dangerous. I can remember when the horrible Rwandan massacre was going on. the genocide. People were saying, I was working in Africa, West Africa at the time, and they were saying, are you worried about going there? I said, do you know how far Rwanda is from where I'm working? I said, it's as far as from Vancouver to Miami. I said, are you worried about what's going on in Miami? But we have this sort of idea.
Right, the globe is so big, right?
Oh.
We're just always talking about New York or Hollywood or Toronto or Ottawa. There's so much more to see in Canada. There's so much more to see in the States, in different countries.
We
and
generalize again, like Africa. Oh, Africa's like this. No, Africa's like 47 different countries, literally hundreds of cultures and languages. So it isn't like any way. It's just a whole bunch of ways.
It's really cool. And so I want to get back into the word explore and activist because time is flying by. We're having such a good time here reading conversation, and we haven't even got into the burning gem yet.
Oh my God, we better do that. I need some sales out of this,
But share a little bit. Let's get into the book because we are running out. We're getting close to the end there. Don, let's talk about The Burning Gem because that's a completely different book than all the other books that I've checked out that you've written.
It is and it isn't. I mean, it certainly is in the sense that it's an urban fantasy. I've never written anything quite like it. But it's also a bit of a metaphor in that we've got two lost souls. Barbara, who's caught in this loveless marriage in the suburbs of New York, just desperate to get out. She's too smart. And this guy, this philandering husband, is a total dickhead. And then this mysterious gem maker who shows up and crystallizes a part of her soul into this magnificent red gem. And she realizes once she has this gem that she's changed completely. So she sees this guy as her way out. She walks through the New York subways, which is pretty frightening, and actually manages to find this guy. But it turns out he's attached to this giant abandoned terminal underneath the New York subway. Now, as strange as this seems, there really was an abandoned subway in the 1870s out in New York. And they had this huge abandoned terminal. So in my book, it's found by people who are looking for a refuge from the world of disbelief, the world of harshness and tribalism and rejection and classification and they come one by one. They find their way here. And these are people who are have old knowledge, bring in old knowledge, and maybe craftspeople, ancient crafts that people have lost, and so they form this kind of utopian community here. And two of the people who helped found it were part of the Manhattan Project, and they were sick about, of course, the application. So they developed a sun to illuminate the entire community. So and people are coming from all over the world to work there, and it's sort of a syndicalist where people are representing it from different crafts, and so there's this initial kind of starting point. But then they find out that these gems that this guy's been making are actually tools of a very of an evil cabal that goes back in ancient times, and it's part of a system of convincing people that there's people who are meant to rule, and then there's slaves. And once you sell that idea, then people give up and they just say, like, we can't do anything. And so this is all part of this large, and it takes on lots of different modes. But when you think about our world, I mean, sure, okay, there's magic, but I mean, you think about artificial intelligence, you think about all of the social media that's being out there right now. It's almost magic. And what is it being used for? Who's benefiting from it? What are we being told? And isn't it actually serving to divide us up into smaller and smaller groups so that we can't fight back? We can't say, hey, this isn't the kind of world we want. We want a better world. So there's that metaphorical part of it. But it's also, I hope, a really exciting story because they come, they go to Budapest, and meet with this ancient drunken agent. By the way, Jim Maker's 110 years old. Just throw that in, and then they track down who's the guy, the Mester, who's sort of behind this. And I'll just leave it to say they have a hell of a confrontation toward the end of the story.
So, Don, what got you into writing that book? Like, who shared their story to get you into all of the gems and the tunnels and?
Yeah, well, partly it's part of the Soul Catcher series. This is and the sequel's coming out in April 2025, which I'm really excited about. But I don't know if you know a guy named Curtis. He was a photographer around the middle of the 19th century who documented Native Indian groups right across North America, including Canada. And those pictures that he took really have lasted, have become our window on these cultures before they had been completely transformed by modernity. Anyway, a lot of the Native people, individuals, balked at having their pictures taken. And they said that, no, it takes a piece of our soul. We don't want that. That, because these cameras would be set up and they take a picture and they'd see this picture and they say, wait, that's not me. This is me. That's an image of me. And it's frozen. It's never going to change, but I am. And so this taken a part of me, a part of my soul. So I was just fascinated by that idea that, these things are like soul catchers. And Curtis himself was called Shadow Catcher. Anyway, so I thought, well, what if there really was a machine that could do that? That could really extract through the eyes a portion of your soul and put it into a gem that would accentuate your strengths and your personality. And so that's where it started. And then of course, like all technology, how would it be used? Well, it could be used for good, but it could more likely be used,
It could be bad too, right?
That's right. So it becomes kind of a real struggle between good and evil. I have a bit of a background in Nietzsche and Nietzsche's ideas of he wrote a book called Beyond Good and Evil, and his idea, basic concept, which was embraced by Hitler, was that there are intended rulers and there's intended slaves, and so anything that tries to level that, whether it's a religion, like he hated Christianity, he hated socialism, he hated anything that didn't recognize the innate superiority of one group over another. And so I've tried to build that into it. I mean, not, hope I'm not, but I don't think I am. I mean, I just think I'm thinking, what an interesting concept. And Nietzsche, of course, looked on as one of the great modern social philosophers. And where did it go? Well, it turned into Nazism. Now, I mean, it was misused, but still the basic concept of these sort of innate divisions, what we've been talking about, not just tribal differences, although classes could certainly be part of that, but just that there's some people meant to rule and there's some people who are meant to be slaves, and just get over it, just accept it and get out of the way, right?
Yeah, just move on over, right?
Get out of the way. So these guys don't move over. They fight back.
No, I think they stay stuck, right? They're like Lego blocks. They don't move.
That's right. But these guys say, no, we're going to find out what's really going on here and try to get to the heart of it. And the first book ends with a confrontation with a sort of the intermediary, the Mester, who may or may not be human. But then they move on in the second book to the Cabal itself, which we find as a location under Buddha Castle, way deep underneath, and it's connected by a maze of tunnels, and things get pretty dark and nasty.
So you said that's coming out in April of next year, right?
Yeah.
So are you excited about it?
I am.
So is there anything you can tell us a little bit about that before next year?
Well, I think that it completes sort of the initial story arc, and that the confrontation is now between this sort of old order that has financed this gigantic operation, that this kind of figure, Justin, is called, but as opposed to the market, which is this kind of open, organic neighborhood community. This is a kind of like a huge steel cube with people who are working there for this order, using all technical and magical capacities to sell this vision of the world, that you should defer to those people who have money and power, and the people who are funding it, of course, it's people who have money and power, but that world is a pretty strange world, and there's 1,000 people working there, and they sign on for 2 years, and then after they get done, their memories are erased, so they don't know what they've been doing during this time. But when
wouldn't it be nice if we could do that for some stuff in life?
yeah. So these guys, but when Barbara ends up there, Barbara is, and she after the confrontation deep underneath the castle of Buddha, she's determined to escape, and so it's a interesting struggle with her and Justin, the head of the cabal, and I think it's pretty exciting. I really do. I mean, it's fun, when you write a book, and of course, when you write a book, it's like when you're in it, you think, I just want to get this over with. What about this part? And you read it over, and say, geez, that's not bad. That's pretty. What happens now?
Right, when you get into the book and you're writing a good chapter, and then you read it, right, when you're going through your edits and all, you're like,
yeah.
oh, where did that come from? Like, how did I come up with that? Like,
yeah. So anyway, I had a lot of fun with it. I wrote it over a long period of time, and I actually started it. We were living in Alabama, of all places, at the time, and I started. And unfortunately, I mean, I don't know if it's unfortunate or not, but I wrote it, and it ended up being I think the final one was about 5. It was like 4,000 or 5,000 words. 100. It's like it was just way too long, and it would have worked out to like 300 or 400 pages, 400 or 500 pages, and so I wasn't getting any interest, and so I worked with an editor, a wonderful woman, and she helped me break it into 2, which I did. And so the 2 are pretty closely linked, but it's kind of an interesting experience to take a single book and break it into. It's not like you can just sort of,
take an axe.
Yeah,
like cutting the logs, right?
But I had just too many people were just saying, no, we're not interested. And it's 300,000 or 400,000 word book. Sorry.
So Don, do you have any other things coming to the table besides that book in 2025?
Well, I'm now working on a 3rd book in that series, because it's quite a wonderful world, and I mean, evil is so darn hard to kill, right? So we may take 3 books to do it.
Well, that's it, right? You get a good character, you don't want to kill them off.
Right. That's right. And we had some really neat characters in the 2nd book, and I don't want to give it away, but they're people from a variety of different backgrounds who pool their knowledge, their cultural and personal knowledge, to escape from this incredible maze of tunnels that nobody's ever escaped from before. So again, a bit of an allegory, but I don't think it's too heavy-handed. But the idea that people come together to figure out problems and solve them. And now this group is sort of bonded after this quite a major battle with this evil bunch, who also have these kind of semi-human monsters that do most of the fighting for them. So yeah, I think you'll enjoy it.
So Don, if anybody wanted to get a hold of you to interview you or to know more about your books, how could they reach you?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for putting up my webpage, and then they can write me there. It's just Don at donsawyer.org, and I'd love to hear from people. And of course, my Facebook too. Just look up Don Sawyer Books, and I try to keep that up to date in terms of what's going on. Yeah, like I mentioned to you that one of the guys that interviewed me from South Africa, we're now working on putting together a global forum to talk about international issues and how we can find ways of coming together. So it's kind of fun, kind of one thing leads to another. And I always enjoy discussions like this with people like you, Liz. I'm sorry you're not going to be around because you obviously have a lot to say and you bring people on, I think, of a good
I just make people spill the tea, right? And we make a big old mess. I was told that this afternoon too by John. Miss Liz, you got a lot more out of me than I expected to get out of me.
Yeah, well, you're good at it.
So I want to thank you, Don, for joining me and sharing your tea and having that good conversation and bringing a lot of good information to the table, because I think we need to start having conversations like this, and start opening the minds and start getting to know people,
Absolutely.
Take out that parachute.
Maybe they're not as scary as you think they are.
Right? We need the parachute back. Missy is going to invent a T parachute and get everybody to run across. And then there was the other one, green light, red light, and green light, red light, I think it was, where we had to stop and then people would be like, I'm going to beat you. I'm not going to beat you. We need to bring that.
I think schools have become kind of risk averse.
Yeah.
And it's understandable. I mean, as a teacher myself, retired. Yeah, I think we've gotten to a point, unfortunately, where teachers are afraid to do some of these things that might be interpreted by some as controversial. Certainly, we see it in the States, unfortunately. Yeah. So, I mean, the things that need to be done are a little risky, and I'm not sure we have the same enthusiasm for risk in education that we once had.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Don, for joining me. And thank you to the listeners out there. Thank you, Shadow God, for joining in tonight. I do see you in the studio. I appreciate that. Thank you to the watchers on Instagram. I do see you guys as well. Thank you for that. YouTube and Twitch and LinkedIn and Facebook, all of you guys for tuning in to Tea Time with Miss Liz. As we said at the beginning of the show, we are doing a countdown. Miss Liz is closing the podcast permanently. There will be other things and other branches that will be watered. So if you want to see these Tea Time guests, check out Miss Liz's YouTube channel, ring that little doorbell and reach out to them. And if you'd like Miss Liz to connect you with any of my guests, I'm more than welcome to do that as well. And Miss Liz will be working with some of the guests in 2025. So look out for that. There are some branches that are going to be watered and some cool stuff that's coming. So I can't tell you too much, but if you want to know more, you're going to have to join Miss Liz on December 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on my YouTube channel. We'll have over 50 different Tea Time guests that are coming back from 5 different seasons from, I believe it's 12 different countries that we have so far that are attending us that night as well. So stay tuned for that. If you'd like to network and connect with any of the guests during that event, you're more than welcome to do that as well. Just send Miss Liz a message. My goal is to connect people and to bring people together. That's what Tea Time is all about. And we need to start watering those branches. The podcast has done that for 5 years. Now we have to take another 5 years and we need to water another branch. And that's how we grow a tree, as we keep watering the branches and keep opening new avenues and new opportunities for everybody out there. So stay true to yourself. Keep serving your tea. Keep bringing the conversations to the table. And we can make a difference when we start serving tea, one cup of tea at a time.